All right, so welcome to Buyers Assembly Online. My name is Aaron, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. How many of you guys are ready to be in a physical location together? If you are, just throw a hand in the chat or something like a heart, something. Throw something in the chat right now, just letting us know if you're ready to be back together. If you have a Bible, you can turn or swipe on your mobile app to 1 Kings 19. That's going to be our passage for today's Change of Plans message, and we're going to be talking about from plan to purpose. While you're turning there or while you're swiping there, I just want to talk for a second about us coming back together. We're working on some plans for us to be able to come back together. Let me just say, it's not as easy as just like, hey, open the doors, let everybody back in. It's going to be, just not quite like that. There are guidelines, there are sanitation things, there are social distancing recommendations. There are all kinds of things we have to take into consideration from a state perspective, from a government perspective. And we want to be wise. We want to protect your health. We want to protect the health of your kids. So we want to make sure that we do it in the best possible way. Also, something that's kind of unique with us, with our church, is that about 30% of our Sunday morning attendance is elementary or younger. That changes the game for us and how we do services. If we have to come back and bring everybody into one room, which we do that on a regular basis about once every 3 months, but to do that consistently over time can be very difficult. So we're talking through all those things. We're working on a plan, and just follow us on social media to stay up to date with where we're going, what we're going to be doing, what dates we're looking at, things like that. We'll be releasing those hopefully soon. So 1 Kings 19 is where we are. That's where we're going to be today. But before we get there, I want to highlight our series verse is in Proverbs 16, verse 9. We've been using this verse throughout this whole series every week. And we have one of our kids ministry kids is going to introduce this verse to you. So check out this video, Proverbs 16, 9.
We can make our own plans, but the Lord determines our steps.
We can make our own plans, but the Lord determines our steps.
All right, man, I love seeing our kids doing those motions and repeating and memorizing that verse. It's awesome to see that happen. Maybe you should just quiz your kids today and just say, hey, do you know the memory verse for this series, and see what they say. If they don't know it, teach it to them. Teach them the motions. Have them send us a video of the motions this week, and we would love to be able to highlight them in the upcoming next week, actually. So our series, Big Idea, kind of goes along with this verse, and it says we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And so our series Big Idea is God's steps are greater than our plans. God's steps are greater than our plans. And so as we talk through this title today of From Plans to Purpose, we're going to talk about a story here in a minute, but I want to just share a story. I've been sharing travel stories with you over the last few weeks, and today you don't have to listen to another one of my travel stories. So I am going to tell you a story that does have to do with me and my life, but it does not have to do with me traveling anywhere. So in light of graduations happening this week and all kinds of things over the last month, people graduating online and in different ways, different settings, and it's looked a lot different. I want to tell you a graduation story today, and it has to do with both high school and college graduation. So when I graduated high school, I went off to a private university south of Dallas to pursue a degree in ministry. And so I graduated in 2004. Yes, that makes me a little bit older than most of you probably thought that I was. But whenever I graduated, I have a picture for you to see me as a high school graduate. You can check out this picture. It's a good laugh for you and your family this morning. So I hope you get a good laugh out of that. And we can get rid of that like any minute right now. So that was me at high school graduation. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go. And I felt a call of God in my life to pursue ministry. And so I thought I'm going to go to a 4-year private school to be able to get a ministry degree, because that was pretty much the only way to be able to get a ministry degree at that point in time. And so off I went. I went to a 4-year school south of Dallas. And I had this goal in mind of getting a ministry degree and also to graduate debt-free. And so my goal being that, I had worked really hard throughout high school, as many of our graduates this year have, and I had received some really good scholarships, and I had some pretty decent financial aid, and I was gearing up to go to this school for 4 years to finish out my degree. And I went through the first year, and I just had to take out a really small loan. It wasn't that much, and I was like, I'm going to be able to pay that off by the time I graduate if I keep working hard. And so it was like really, really good setup. And all of a sudden, in the middle of my second semester, I had this change of plans moment. In the middle of my second semester, I got my financial aid back for my second year. And I had been working a job and making pretty decent money. And because of that, my financial aid for year 2 was completely removed. I got zero financial aid for my second year of school. And so I had this massive change of plans moment, and I was devastated, honestly. I was really frustrated. I was like, God, I thought you wanted me to be here. God, I thought you wanted me to be pursuing this. God, I really thought I was following your steps, God. And in that process, in that moment, I was like really frustrated, and I actually stayed the summer in that town, and I continued to work, and I prayed, and I was going, God, will you make a way? And I tried everything I could. And I remember in June, I called my parents one night, and I was like 19 at the time, and I called my parents, and honestly, I was crying so hard. I was bawling my eyes out, to be honest, like a little baby. And I was crying, and I remember my parents answering the phone, and I think that they were like really confused. They were like, what's going on? What's happening? Because I don't know that they could even understand what I was saying. And so in that moment, I was just really devastated. And I was like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to have to go a different route. I have a plan. I already know which way I'm going to go. I already know what I'm going to do. And in that process, I realized that I was going to have to leave that school if I was going to stay debt-free. And so in July, I decided to move back home and attend MSU and get a business degree. And I knew if I continued to work hard, if I continued to pray, if I continued to do these things, that I could graduate debt-free. And so in that process, what I thought was just a frustration, what I thought was a change of plans, what I thought was God shifting my whole destiny or my whole purpose, was really God just positioning me for something that I didn't even know was coming. And so as I came back, I began to go to school. I was going to school for about 15 hours a week, a full load, doing 30 hours of work every week. I was volunteering at our local church about 20, 30 hours a week as well, and just kind of doing the college life and making sure that I was doing all these different things. And in the end of it, I ended up graduating completely debt-free, which was one of my goals. And it was awesome. And I thought that would be, that was like one of my main goals. And so I graduated debt-free, and it was incredible. And so I actually have another picture for you of me graduating college. They're going to throw that up for you. And you can see that long hair. I'm thinking with quarantine hair, I'm just going to let it keep going. We're going to get back to that length one day. So that's kind of like my plan at the moment. So we're just going to keep going that direction. But you can take that down. And I graduated college. It was like things were good. And then all of a sudden, I realized it was 2008. And if you're old enough to remember what happened in 2008, the housing market crashed, the stock market crashed, and we had a major recession across our country. And so I was a new college graduate trying to get into a workforce in a recession, which is a great time to do that. And actually, I had 2 business jobs lined up that I could have stepped into, but I knew that wasn't God's next step for me. And so instead of stepping into those things, I just prayed, and I applied to like 1 million churches and 1 million different camps and all kinds of places trying to do ministry, because that's really what I was passionate about. And through that season and through that process, I got turned down so many times at different churches and different camps because we were in the middle of a recession and none of them were hiring. None of them were looking to add to their staff. And so in that process, I was incredibly frustrated. And I was just like, God, I thought that this was the plan. God, I thought that this was where you were taking me. God, I thought that you were going to take me to do this thing or that thing. And I remember through that process that my goal had been to be debt-free, and I was debt-free at that point in time. And I realized that God, through that process, he wasn't just using me in that season, but he was positioning me for me to follow his steps and not have to follow my pressured plans. You see, if I'd had all this debt in 2008, I would have been highly pressured to take steps that would have been my steps. They would have been my plans. They would have been my own desires. But instead, I was in a position to be able to follow God's steps. It had positioned me to be able to step into ministry and into people's lives over the last 12 years. And it's been a journey over the last 12 years of taking the steps that God wanted for me. But those steps position me to meet my wife. That's a pretty good bonus of God's steps. It positions you to meet great people, maybe a spouse for you single people, maybe some really good friends. But it positioned me to meet my wife. Those steps also positioned me to lead a rural church in a very unique way. In a very, very unique way. Jason and I were actually talking this week about how the past and what I thought were just messed up plans at times, and God was positioning me to be able to step in and lead our church here. And so through this season of changes of plans, through this season of things that are frustrating, through this season of things not being the way you thought they would, I want to ask you this question. What if this change of plans season is to help you find your God-given purpose and calling? What if this change of plans season is to help you find your God-given purpose and calling? What if it isn't just about your plans being sidetracked or your plans being destroyed or your plans being altered, but what if it's about God helping you find your purpose and positioning you for purpose? In 1 Kings chapter 19, we find a story that a lot of people actually don't know about, but it's a powerful story that we find in the Old Testament. And I want to give you some backstory of what we're going to read, but there was this prophet named Elijah. There's two different names in this story, and both of them are very similar. So one of the guys, his name was Elijah with a J. The other guy's name was Elisha with an S. And Elijah was a prophet, and he would hear from God, and he would take what he heard from God, and he would tell the people that God had told him to tell the message. And so he did this all the time, and he would perform miracles. He performed many miracles throughout his life, and he performed some pretty crazy miracles. He actually called down fire from heaven one time. He also raised a dead child back to life. He did some pretty big things. And during this time, we see Elijah come across the path of a young man named Elisha. And so in verse 19 of 1 Kings 19, we pick up this story, and it says this. So Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. And there were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. You see, Elisha, he had a pretty good life. He was kind of living the dream of his family, and his family had a really good situation. They had a nice farm. They had some employees. They had some oxen. They had some ground to plow. They had crops to harvest. They had some money. They had a good situation, and Elisha, he's in line to inherit all of this. The place where he lived, the literal translation of the location where Elisha lived translates to mean meadow of dancing. Meadow of dancing. If you could live in any place in the world, that would be a pretty cool place to live, in the meadow of dancing. And if you want to live in the meadow of dancing, just throw the dancing girl in the emojis over, or in the chat over there. Throw an emoji or a gif of someone dancing in the chat. And so he lived in the meadow of dancing. And his family had all this kind of stuff lined out. And Elisha, he's there, and he's working the family farm. He knows that one day he'll be able to inherit all of this stuff. And in that process, Elijah shows up and changes all the plans. You see, Elijah shows up, and it says this: Elijah went over to him, and he threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then he walked away. See, Elijah, he threw his mantle or his cloak across the shoulders or across the back of Elisha. And what he was telling Elisha with this gesture, he was saying, your plan is good, but God has different steps in store for you. So change of plans, Elisha. You're not gonna inherit the family farm. You can take a moment, you can have an opportunity here to follow me, be my apprentice, be my assistant, and do something powerful for God. Do something with purpose for God. Or you can just stay here in this field, and you can keep plowing, and you can inherit the plans that you had for yourself, or maybe your family had for you. But we know that in this moment, in this season, Elisha, he's looking at it, and he's going, man, I have my plan, then I have God's steps. I have my plan, then I have God's steps. I have my plan, and then I have God's steps. And through this whole series, we talked about how God's steps are always greater than our plans. God's steps, they're always greater than our plans. And in verse 20, Elisha makes a critical decision. It says, Elisha left the oxen standing there. He ran after Elijah, and he said to him, first, let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you. And Elijah replied, he said, go on back, but think about what I have done to you. He said, hey, I want you to count the cost of what I'm asking of you. You see, whenever we follow God's steps instead of our own plans, there's always a cost that comes along with it. Whenever we follow God's steps instead of our own plans, there's always sacrifice that comes along with it. And Elijah, he's saying, hey, I want you to go back, but I want you to think about what I've just done. I'm calling you away from your plans, and I'm asking you to embark on God's steps. You see, Elisha, he has two options here. And what we see happen in verse 21 is so Elisha returned to his oxen, and he slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. And he passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. And then he went with Elijah as his assistant. You You see these two options he's faced with. He had the option to continue with his plan and take on the family business, or he had the option to trust God's steps and follow after his purpose. But Elijah showed up and he changed the plans of Elisha forever. And I think in this season of COVID, we're kind of having this moment where our plans are all jacked up. Our plans are very different than we thought they would be right now for the majority of Americans and the majority of the world. Our plans are very, very different. And we're faced with a decision similar to Elisha where as we begin to go back into our workforce, as we begin to go back into church, as we begin to go back into things, we can go right back into the same plans that we had always had, the same things we had always done, the same busy lifestyles we had always had, the same relationships we had always had, the same whatever we had always been. Or we can make a decision and say, you know what, I don't just want my plans, I want God's steps, and I'm going to follow after God's steps, not just my plans. And Elisha, he says, you know what, I'm going to trust God's steps because it's going to lead me to my purpose. And although inheriting the family farm is a good thing, although inheriting the family business is a good thing, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to step away from the plan that I had, and I'm going to step in to the purpose and to the calling that God is leading me into. You see, this was an all-in moment. And he has this all-in for God's steps moment. And he abandons his own plans. And what I want you to know today is that to follow God's steps, sometimes we have to abandon our own plans. To follow God's steps, sometimes we have to abandon our own plans. I found myself in this situation so many times in life as I follow after Jesus, where I'm constantly faced with am I going to do it Aaron's way, or am I going to do it God's way? Am I going to keep pursuing Aaron's dream, or am I going to pursue God's dream? Am I going to pursue Aaron's comfort, or am I going to pursue God's purpose? Am I going to pursue the things that make Aaron happy, or am I going to pursue the things that that define the purpose that God has put on my life? And I find myself in these situations on a regular basis, and oftentimes I have to abandon my plans to pursue God's purpose. Oftentimes I have to abandon my own plans to pursue God's steps and God's purpose. And I just want to throw a side note out there for you. Don't walk away from something that God is not calling you to walk away from. Some of you are hearing this message and you have thoughts in your head and you're saying, man, I'm supposed to walk away from this. Aaron, you're telling me to leave my job. I'm not telling you to leave your job. I'm telling you to ask God, what do you want for this next season of my life? I'm not telling you to change something drastically in your world. I'm saying that stay in tune with the Holy Spirit. Ask God, what are your steps? I have plans. Plans are good. But God, I don't just want my plans. I want your steps. God, I don't just want to do my direction, but I want to go your direction. God, what are you inviting me into as we come out of this season? What are you inviting me into? What job are you inviting me into? What relationships are you inviting me into? What career maybe are you inviting me into? Where are you calling me to go? What college are you inviting me into? How do you want me to do this next season of life? But don't walk away from something that God isn't calling you to walk away from. As we close out today, I'm going to ask Aaron to come back up. And I just want to talk for a second about something that a lot of us probably haven't done in a long, long time. How many of you, or just out of curiosity, when is the last time that you tried to stretch and touch your toes? Like full on, reach down, touch your toes. When's the last time that you did that? I'm really curious. So throw some comments in the chat right now, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 decades. I don't care. Throw it out there. Just let us know. When's the last time that you tried to stretch and touch your toes? The only way, I don't know if you know this or not, but the only way to gain flexibility or to maintain flexibility is to stretch. It's to stretch. That's the only way. To gain or maintain flexibility, you have to consistently stretch. You have to consistently put your body in a position that isn't necessarily comfortable. It's a little bit straining. It's a little bit uncomfortable. It's a little bit awkward at times, but you're forcing flexibility on yourself. And this season has been a stretching season. This season has been one that has been different than any of us expected. It's definitely been a change of plans. And we see with Elisha and with every hero of faith that God uses stretching seasons to keep us flexible so that we follow his steps and don't solely rely on our plans. Because if it was up to us, we would get into a routine and into a plan, and we would just keep doing that over and over and over and over again. And we would totally work God out of the equation. We would work him out. We wouldn't even need him. We would just do our thing. We wouldn't even need God. And God says, I allow stretching seasons. Sometimes I invite stretching seasons because I want to make sure that you stay flexible to hear my voice. See, in stretching seasons, we need the voice of God. In seasons where we're not stretched, we got this. But in stretching seasons, we're like, God, we need you. God, we need to hear your voice. God, I need to know your direction. God, I need to know what you want me to do. God, I need to know those things. And Elisha, he finds himself in this stretching season. And it keeps him flexible. You see, Elijah performed many miracles. Some people think he performed 16. Some people think he performed a few less, 14. But he performed a lot. And Elisha, he followed him until God took him. And then Elisha received a double portion. And he did double the miracles of Elijah. Double the miracles. All because he was willing to follow God's steps and not his own plan. He's willing to follow God's steps and not his own plan. So what if this change of plan season is God shifting you into your calling and into your purpose? Away from your own plans, away from your own design, and into a specific purpose. What if he's positioning you for purpose in this season? You see, when I couldn't go back to the university without without taking out massive loans, I thought I had missed God's plan for my life. I thought I maybe had just missed God's voice. And that was one of the most difficult seasons for me ever. A lot of tears, a lot of frustration. But when in reality, what I thought was just maybe a missed plan, it was really God had different steps for me to follow. It was different steps for me to follow. And it led me into very uncomfortable situations and very stretching situations that caused me to have to be very flexible. But what I didn't realize is that flexibility was positioning me for what I'm doing now and for what I really truly believe God wants me to do for a long, long time into the future. But all that happened in the stretching and in the uncomfortable. But a lot of times, I want to leave you with this quote by Mark Batterson. Too many of us get comfortable with comfort. We follow Jesus to the edge of inconvenience, but no further. And let me just say, I don't want to be someone who follows Jesus just to the edge of comfort or just to the edge of convenience. But I want to be someone who follows Jesus way beyond my comfort level, way beyond my convenience level. I want us to be a church full of people who follow Jesus way beyond our comfort level, way beyond our inconvenience level. I want us to be people that pursue the plans and the steps that God has for us, not just our own plans, not just our own desires, not just our own thoughts, but the things that God wants for us. Let me just say that takes way beyond comfort. It takes way beyond convenience because it's in the stretching that we find our purpose. It's in the stretching that we find the plans that God has for us. It's in the stretching that we realize that we can't do this by ourselves, that we actually need God. It's in those moments. And as we close out today, I'm going to say, if you want to know God's purpose for your life, you can't know it without knowing Him. And if you want to have a relationship with Him, you can start that relationship right now in this moment by you just saying, God, I want a relationship with you. Jesus, I want to follow you. And instantly you can start a relationship with God, and instantly you can begin to talk to Him and invite Him in and ask Him to show you your purpose. If you want to do that right now, I would love for you to do that. And if you'll fill out a Connect card when you're done, we'll put a Following Jesus book in your hands. We want to help you take that decision and move forward with it. But then for everyone else, I want to pray a specific prayer over you. I want to pray that you would find your purpose and calling in this season, and I want to pray that you would remain flexible. In the stretching, that you would remain flexible. In the stretching, that you would turn to God. In the stretching, that you would find your purpose. So let me pray over us today. Invite God's stretching into your life today. Invite His purpose into your life today. Maybe you need to abandon some plans that you have. Maybe you need to abandon some thoughts that you have. Maybe you need to abandon some old ways of living that you had. And you need to say, you know what, God, I'm walking in your steps from now on. Lord, we love you. God, we invite your presence into our houses right now. God, we invite your presence into our rooms right now. God, we ask and we pray over every individual who's watching this in this moment, or maybe for weeks to come or months to come, no matter when they watch it. I pray right now that God, that they would find their purpose and their calling during this season, whether it's the present, current season, or it's the season that they're watching it in. I pray that God, that they would find their purpose and their calling, and that God, it wouldn't just be them planning out their life, but they would know the purpose that you have for it. And God, I pray that through this season of stretching, that we would maintain and we would gain flexibility, God. I pray that we would be highly flexible people, that we would be people who are listening to your spirit, we would be people that are listening to your voice. And when you say move, when you say step, when you say change, God, we do it. That God, we don't allow our comfort or our convenience levels to control us. But God, we listen to your steps. We listen to your voice. And God, we trust you and we praise you this morning. And God, we're thankful for what you're doing in our hearts, even in the midst of the changes of plans that we're going through. God, we know that you're up to something good. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you for joining us today.